The Galactic Empire had stretched its dark wings across the stars for centuries, a ruthless force that crushed every world beneath its iron grip. Their power was absolute, their technology far beyond anything any species could fathom. The countless civilizations they had conquered were proof of their might, leaving no room for negotiation. But Earth was different. No one had expected humanity to be a challenge. They were an isolated planet, unconnected to the greater galactic network, living in relative peace and ignorance of the Empire's cruel ambitions. Yet, as the Empire's colossal fleet descended into Earth's skies, everything changed. Dreadnoughts, massive warships of unimaginable power, blotted out the sun. They hovered like dark clouds, their ominous presence filling the atmosphere with a sense of dread. A wave of fear surged across Earth as governments scrambled to understand the threat. What was this force that could silence the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy with a single flick of its hand? And why, of all the worlds in the universe, had they come for Earth? The Empire did not believe in subtlety. As their fleet anchored above Earth, an elite delegation of high-ranking officials descended from their flagship, stepping onto Earth's surface as if it were their rightful domain. Their representatives, adorned in resplendent uniforms and regal insignia, made their way to the gathering of Earth's leaders. The moment they landed, they were greeted by silence. Earth's leaders, those who had managed to meet in secret to discuss their response to the invasion, stood before them. They were ordinary people. No military generals or advanced diplomats, just everyday humans who had been thrust into extraordinary circumstances. The Empire's envoy addressed them with cold arrogance, declaring that Earth's resistance would be futile. "We are the Empire," they said, "and you will submit to our rule, as all other species have before you. Resistance is pointless." The humans exchanged looks. Their world was unprepared, their defenses almost non-existent. Yet, deep in the hearts of Earth's leaders, there was something the Empire had overlooked: pride. President Sarah Lockwood, the calm yet steely leader of Earth, stepped forward. She wasn't a soldier, nor a diplomat, but she had something far more dangerous: a deep, unshakable belief in her people. Despite the fear that gripped the air around them, despite the obvious power of the Empire's invasion, she remained resolute. "We don't negotiate with murderers," she said, her voice clear and firm, cutting through the tension in the room. It wasn't a plea or a threat. It was a statement, one that carried weight far beyond her words. For a brief moment, silence hung heavy in the air. The Empire's representatives exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. This wasn't the reaction they had expected. Human history was filled with stories of surrender, of empires that had crushed the will of lesser species with ease. Earth was no different, they had assumed. But Lockwood's declaration was something new. She wasn't backing down. The arrogance of the Empire faltered, just for a moment, as they realized something. They were facing a species unlike any they had encountered before. They had come to dominate, but Earth would not bow. The Empire's lead negotiator, a tall alien with sharp features and a voice that could command armies, gave a tight smile. "Your resistance is futile. You will learn that we are not like the others you may have faced. The choice is simple: surrender or be destroyed." But Lockwood's resolve did not falter. She locked eyes with the alien negotiator and said, "We're not interested in your offer. Earth will not kneel." Her words were not just defiance. They were a promise. She turned to her fellow leaders who stood behind her, united. They too understood the gravity of the situation, but they would not be cowed by threats. Outside, the sky darkened with the shadows of the dreadnoughts, their presence like a storm ready to break. The Empire's fleet waited, poised to strike. But inside the conference room, something had shifted. The humans weren't afraid, and that, more than anything, terrified the Empire. As the Empire's envoy began to realize that this would not be an easy conquest, they were left with one chilling truth. Earth would not give up without a fight. The fate of the world, and perhaps the galaxy, hung on that one simple statement. It was a declaration that would echo far beyond the conference room and across the stars, setting the stage for a battle that no one could predict. The human delegation, led by President Sarah Lockwood, boarded the Empire's flagship with a mix of unease and determination. The massive warship loomed above them, its dark metallic surface reflecting the cold stars of space. It was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Its size alone was enough to fill the hearts of many with dread. Surrounding the vessel were smaller ships, sleek and deadly, positioned in perfect formation. The Empire's display of power was a calculated reminder that they were in complete control, their technology unmatched by any civilization in the galaxy. As the humans were escorted through the corridors of the ship, the air felt heavy, as if the very walls were watching them. The Empire's soldiers, towering and imposing, moved with mechanical precision, their eyes cold and calculating. Every step the humans took felt like a silent warning. To many, it was clear. They were not in control here. The humans were mere pawns in an alien chess game they had not chosen to play. They arrived at the Grand Meeting Hall, a room that could have easily fit 100 humans, yet it was designed to intimidate. Massive alien symbols adorned the walls, and towering figures of previous Empire leaders loomed over the humans from portraits and statues, all of them exuding an oppressive sense of authority. At the far end of the room, the Empire's delegation waited. Their leaders, the finest minds of the Empire, sat in ornate chairs, exuding an air of superiority. They barely acknowledged the human delegation's arrival, as if they were certain that this would be a brief, straightforward encounter, one in which they would quickly secure Earth's submission. The leader of the Empire's delegation, a sharp-eyed alien whose form seemed more regal than any human could have imagined, stood and greeted Lockwood with a cold smile. His name was High Commander Vare, and he had overseen the conquest of dozens of worlds. He did not believe this meeting would be any different. "We are aware of your planet's resistance," Vare began, his voice smooth, almost condescending. "But let me be clear, you have no chance. The power of the Galactic Empire is beyond your understanding. Your military is no match for our forces, and your technology is laughable. You will comply, and in exchange, we will allow your species to survive, at least for a time." His eyes gleamed as he spoke, a sense of finality in his tone. Lockwood stood in silence, her face an unreadable mask. The words hung in the air like an invisible weight. The offer was straightforward, yet arrogant in its simplicity. Earth could live, but only if it bent the knee. To some, it might have seemed like the only reasonable option. But to Lockwood, this was more than just a battle for survival. This was a battle for Earth's very soul. As the Empire's representatives looked on, certain that they had already won, Lockwood's mind raced. She understood the power of the Empire, but she also understood something they didn't: the strength of the human spirit. They might not have the advanced technology or the vast armies the Empire boasted, but humans had something far more dangerous: an unyielding will to fight for what they believed in. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched out, thick with tension. The Empire's arrogance seemed to grow with every passing second, but Lockwood remained unshaken. She knew that speaking now would not change anything. Instead, she allowed them to bask in their perceived victory. She allowed them to believe that they had already won. This would not be a simple submission. Earth's resistance would not be so easily crushed. Then, as Vare seemed about to press the humans for a response, Lockwood's calm voice broke through the quiet. "We are not afraid of you," she said, her words cutting through the room like a blade. "You speak of power, but you underestimate what you are dealing with. Humans do not bend. We do not surrender to threats. You came here to conquer, but you will learn that we will never submit to you or your empire." Her voice was firm, unwavering. She had no illusions about the empire's might, but there was something in her words that caused even Vare's cold expression to falter, if only for a second. The room seemed to freeze. For a moment, Vare's confidence wavered, though it was barely noticeable. His eyes narrowed, and the other Empire representatives exchanged brief, unreadable glances. They had expected Earth to fall at their feet, to accept their terms, and become just another pawn in their galactic chess game. Instead, they found themselves facing a defiance that they could not comprehend. Lockwood's mind was already several steps ahead. She had been in countless meetings where the outcome was decided before it even began, but this was different. This time, Earth was not going to fold. The Empire's arrogance would be its downfall. They had come expecting a simple victory, but now they would face the consequences of underestimating humanity. And soon, the Empire would realize that this was not an invitation to surrender. It was an invitation to their own undoing. The Galactic Empire had a long, dark history of conquering countless worlds, and their method was always the same: overwhelming force, rapid subjugation, and if any resistance remained, swift and brutal extermination. Across the galaxy, civilizations had fallen, one after another, to the might of the Empire's technologically superior fleets. Entire species had been wiped out, entire cultures erased, their planets left as barren wastelands. The Empire had no time for weaklings, no patience for rebellion. It was a well-oiled machine of conquest, its forces trained for one purpose: to dominate. Each world the Empire encountered was met with the same fate. Rebels and freedom fighters, no matter how brave, were crushed beneath the Empire's vast war machines. Any technology that could pose a threat was either assimilated or destroyed. There was no mercy, no negotiation. The Empire's leaders believed in their superiority above all else, and rightfully so. No other civilization had ever posed a true challenge. It was almost as if they had perfected the art of control, and they had grown complacent, certain that no force in the galaxy could stand against them. After all, no one ever had. Yet rumors had begun to circulate, whispers that spoke of a species unlike the others, a species that had somehow evaded the Empire's grasp, a species that had fought back with an intensity and cunning that even the Empire's most seasoned generals found unsettling. This species, humans, were unlike any the Empire had encountered before. These rumors had started small, from outlying systems where a few minor skirmishes had been reported. At first, the Empire had laughed them off. What were these humans compared to the might of the Empire? Their technology was primitive at best, their military forces non-existent. How could they possibly pose a threat? But as the whispers spread, so did the stories of human ingenuity. Small, unexpected victories began to pile up. An ambush here, a surprise counterattack there. Even more troubling were the reports from Empire scouts who described encounters with humans that didn't retreat, didn't surrender. In every engagement, no matter how outmatched, the humans fought with a ferocity that was nearly impossible to understand. What was even more baffling was their creativity in battle. Where the Empire relied on brute force and overwhelming firepower, the humans were learning and adapting, finding ways to use their environment, their technology, and even their weaknesses to outsmart their enemies. At first, the Empire's high command dismissed these reports as flukes, nothing more than lucky, victories by a few desperate rebels. But as more and more incidents occurred, the cracks in their arrogance began to show. One by one, systems that had once fallen to the Empire now resisted, and it seemed that each time, the humans' tactics became more unpredictable, more dangerous. And then, it happened. The Empire's once uncontested fleet encountered a force of humans, a fleet they had not expected, that didn't just retreat in the face of superior strength, it fought back. Against all odds, the humans pushed back the Empire's ships, even if only for a short time, and that was enough to send shockwaves through the Empire's leadership. The most disturbing thing about these humans was their refusal to give up. Where other species would have broken under the weight of the Empire's force, the humans stood firm, unwilling to surrender. In every battle, they adapted, learned, and fought with an unrelenting spirit that seemed to grow stronger with each conflict. The Empire had expected Earth to be no different from the countless worlds they had conquered, but Earth's defiance had made them rethink everything. In the Empire's war rooms, maps were drawn, strategies were discussed, and plans were made to crush the human resistance once and for all. But the more the Empire's leaders delved into humanity's history, the more they realized they had misjudged this species. Earth had not fallen when it should have. The humans had, in fact, done the impossible. They had made the Empire question its own power. Still, the High Command was confident. After all, they had always triumphed before. They would crush this human uprising as they had crushed all others. Yet, in the back of their minds, the nagging question remained. What if this time they were wrong? What if Earth was the one planet that would not fall? The more the Empire underestimated humanity's resolve, the more they played into the hands of those they thought they had already beaten. And with each passing day, the Empire's overconfidence grew, its certainty of victory a little less secure. As the tension between Earth and the Empire grew, the stakes became clearer. The Empire's past had been one of conquest and domination, but the future, especially one where the humans stood resolute, was still an unknown. And for the first time in a long while, the Empire had to ask itself, could it be that this strange species, these humans, were more than just an obstacle? Could they actually be the one force capable of toppling the mighty Empire? The time had come for the crucial summit on the Empire's flagship, the moment that would decide Earth's fate. The grand meeting hall was eerily silent, filled with the Empire's most influential leaders and military commanders. Earth's delegation stood at the far end of the room, President Sarah Lockwood at the forefront, her presence commanding yet calm. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, knowing that the fate of her people rested on the words she would speak. The Empire's representatives, seated with their usual air of superiority, looked down at the humans with expressions of cold amusement, convinced that Earth's leaders would eventually bend to their demands, just as every other civilization had before them. The tension in the room was thick, a palpable sense of anticipation hanging in the air. The Empire's High Command had already laid out their terms: unconditional surrender, complete subjugation, and the assimilation of Earth into their vast galactic empire. They spoke of Earth's destruction, of how easy it would be to obliterate the planet should the humans continue to resist. The terms were clear, and the message was as straightforward as it was brutal: submit or perish. President Lockwood listened quietly as the Empire's negotiators presented their terms, her face a mask of unwavering determination. The high-ranking officials spoke of their technological superiority, their vast fleets, and the inevitability of humanity's defeat. Yet, throughout the entire exchange, Lockwood remained composed, her mind far from the immediate pressure. She was not here to be intimidated or to negotiate from a place of weakness. Her resolve was firm. She knew that anything less than full resistance would be a betrayal of her people. When the Empire had finished, expecting a quick and easy response from the humans, it was Lockwood's turn to speak. She stood tall, her voice calm but cutting, through the room like a blade. "Humans don't negotiate with murderers," she said, her words echoing across the chamber. The room went silent. The Empire's representatives, who had expected a simple plea for mercy or a tentative offer of surrender, were stunned. The cold indifference that had marked their demeanor faltered, replaced with confusion and a tinge of uncertainty. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a desperate plea. It was a declaration. Lockwood's voice carried with it an unshakable conviction, a promise that no matter the cost, humanity would never bow to those who sought to annihilate innocent lives in the name of power. Her words rippled out through the communication channels, reaching not just the Empire's elite, but also every corner of Earth. Across the planet, her statement resonated with millions, stirring a collective will that no fleet or weapon could easily crush. The message was clear: Earth would not give in. The Empire's representatives exchanged quick, nervous glances, the cracks in their composure growing wider. For the first time, they felt something they had not anticipated: doubt. They had expected Earth to cower before them, to beg for mercy as so many others had. But the humans stood firm, unwilling to compromise. Lockwood's words had shattered the Empire's illusion of control, and in that moment, they realized that their usual tactics might not be enough to crush this species. High Commander Vare, the Empire's leader who had once seen humanity as nothing more than an obstacle, now stood with his hands clasped tightly in front of him. He looked at Lockwood, his expression darkening. "You are making a grave mistake," he said, his voice low, tinged with both anger and something else, perhaps a reluctant respect. "The fate of your world is in your hands. You could avoid destruction. All we ask is your submission." Lockwood's gaze never wavered. "We've heard your offer, and we reject it. We will not surrender. We will not be your slaves." Her words held a weight far greater than just defiance. They were a call to every free-thinking individual across the galaxy. The Empire had underestimated humanity's strength, and now they were paying the price. The silence in the room was deafening, as if the entire universe had frozen in place. Even the Empire's most battle-hardened commanders seemed uncertain, perhaps for the first time in their lives, questioning whether their superiority was truly as absolute as they had always believed. And for a brief, fleeting moment, the Empire began to realize something they had never considered. The humans were not afraid. They were not afraid of dying, of losing, or of destruction. They had something more valuable than technology or weapons: a fierce, unbreakable spirit. As the communication channels buzzed with Lockwood's words, the shockwaves reverberated across the stars. Earth was not the first planet to face the Empire's might, but it would be the first to refuse to submit, to stand resolute in the face of annihilation. The die had been cast, and there was no turning back. The Empire could either crush humanity, or it would have to face a battle unlike any it had ever known. For the first time, it was the Empire that was on the defensive. And as the summit ended, the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see how this monumental struggle would unfold. The Empire, shocked by humanity's refusal to submit, decided it was time to reveal the full extent of their power. High Commander Vare's face hardened as he stepped forward, his voice colder than ever. "You leave us no choice, President Lockwood," he said, his words carrying the weight of centuries of conquest. "We have the means to end this. You have only one path left: submit or be wiped from existence." With a subtle motion, he activated a holographic display, and the room was instantly filled with a terrifying image. A weapon unlike anything the humans could imagine. The hologram revealed a massive, ancient structure, built deep within the heart of the Empire's strongest fortress. It was a planet-destroying weapon, a relic from the Empire's darkest era, capable of eradicating entire worlds with a single strike. Its sheer scale was beyond comprehension, the weapon designed to ensure that no species, no matter how defiant, could escape the Empire's grasp. The room fell deathly silent as the implications of the weapon's power sank in. Vare's cold voice cut through the silence. "This weapon is called the Star Wiper. It was developed eons ago, in a time when the Empire was still young. With it, we can obliterate any planet in an instant. You think you can resist us? You think your rebellion will stand?" This weapon is our final word. Submit, or we will make an example of Earth." His gaze locked with Lockwood's, an unspoken challenge in the air. The human leaders braced themselves, but none of them flinched. The weight of the threat was crushing, but President Lockwood's resolve remained unshaken. For a moment, it seemed as if the humans might crumble. The sheer scale of the weapon's destruction was unimaginable. Earth's defense forces, though valiant, were no match for such overwhelming power. Yet, as the Empire's representatives waited for Lockwood to break under the pressure, something unexpected happened. Instead of retreating or begging for mercy, the human delegation responded with a quiet confidence that left the Empire's leaders unsettled. Lockwood's voice, calm yet resolute, echoed through the chamber once more. "We won't surrender, and we have something you didn't expect." The Empire's commanders, still reeling from the shock of the Star Wiper's threat, exchanged confused glances. What could the humans possibly have to counter such a weapon? Lockwood's words were a challenge they hadn't anticipated. For a moment, the silence stretched, and the Empire began to wonder, could the humans truly have something that could stand up to the might of their ancient weapon? And then, the humans revealed their surprise. President Lockwood gestured to her. Chief Scientist Dr. William Hargrove, who stepped forward, his expression serious. With a swift motion, Hargrove activated a hologram of his own. What appeared was a series of blueprints, complex and intricate, depicting highly advanced technology, spaceships unlike anything the Empire had seen, weapons that rivaled the Empire's own destructive power, and a new form of artificial intelligence capable of making split-second strategic decisions in battle. The humans, it seemed, had been preparing in secret. While the Empire believed Earth to be a primitive, defenseless planet, they had underestimated the ingenuity and resourcefulness of humanity. "We've spent decades studying your technology, learning from it," Dr. Hargrove said, his voice steady but filled with pride. "We've harnessed the resources of our planet in ways you could never have imagined. And now, we stand ready. These technologies are still in the prototype stage, but they are more than capable of defending Earth and pushing back any invader." The Empire's representatives were taken aback. How could this be? How could humanity, so young in the grand scheme of galactic history, have developed such sophisticated technology? The humans had kept it hidden, developing their own powerful spacecraft, advanced weapons, and artificial intelligence, all with one goal in mind: to protect their home and preserve their freedom. These prototypes were humanity's secret weapon, the result of years of research and collaboration, and now the Empire was seeing them for the first time. The shock was palpable. For a moment, the room was filled with stunned silence. The Empire had expected to be met with fear, with pleas for mercy, but instead, they faced a humanity that was far more resourceful and capable than they had ever imagined. The Star Wiper, the Empire's ultimate tool of destruction, was a terrifying weapon. But now it was clear that Earth had its own means of defense, its own way of fighting back. The battle lines had shifted, and the Empire was no longer so certain of its victory. Lockwood's eyes remained locked with High Commander Veers, her voice unwavering. "You threatened us with extinction, but we will not go quietly. We will not be destroyed. We will fight, and we will win." In that moment, the Empire's overwhelming sense of superiority began to crack. The humans had not only found a way to defend themselves, they had found a way to fight back, and they had done it in secret, out of the Empire's reach. The battle was far from over, but one thing was certain: Earth was no longer an easy target. And as the Empire's representatives processed this new reality, they realized that the humans had become a threat far greater than they could have ever predicted. As the first skirmishes erupted in space, the Empire was caught off guard. The humans, who had once seemed so insignificant to the Empire's vast and powerful fleet, were proving to be more than just a nuisance. With their newly developed spacecraft, weapons, and advanced artificial intelligence, the human resistance fought with an intensity and creativity that sent shockwaves through the Empire's ranks. The first few engagements were small, ambushes, hit-and-run tactics, but they were enough to show that the Empire's once unquestionable superiority was no longer guaranteed. The Empire's fleet, accustomed to facing weak and easily defeated foes, struggled to keep up with the unexpected maneuvers of the human ships. The humans didn't fight like other species. They didn't simply try to outgun their enemies. They used their environment, their surroundings, and their advanced technologies in ways that were both clever and unpredictable. In the deep reaches of space, the Empire's massive warships, while technologically superior, were finding themselves outwitted and outmaneuvered. The first significant victory came when a small fleet of human resistance ships managed to cripple an Empire destroyer, a flagship that had once seemed untouchable. The attack was swift and brutal. Using their advanced AI systems, the humans had orchestrated a series of surprise strikes, hitting the destroyer's weak points with precision. The ship was forced to retreat, its hull battered and its systems crippled. It was a victory that stunned both the Empire and the human fighters. They had done the impossible, defeated a fleet that had once seemed invincible. The Empire, bewildered and increasingly angry, began to question everything it had known about the galaxy's power dynamics. This primitive species, these humans, had not only fought back, they were actually winning. The Empire's commanders, once so certain of their domination, now found themselves struggling to adjust to this new reality. Their massive warships were no longer the terrifying behemoths they once were. They were vulnerable, and they were beginning to understand that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't just technology. It was their tenacity, their refusal to give in. Every small victory by the humans, every successful strike against the Empire's fleet sent ripples of hope through the galaxy. The once feared Empire was showing cracks, and the oppressed systems that had long been under its heel began to take notice. President Lockwood's message, broadcast to every corner of the galaxy, was a call to arms. "We will fight, and we will win." Her words spread like wildfire, igniting sparks of rebellion in systems far and wide. For the first time in centuries, the Empire was no longer the unquestionable ruler of the stars. Humanity's resilience became a symbol of hope. Across the galaxy, those who had lived under the Empire's cruel rule began to find new strength. Disenfranchised species and oppressed colonies, who had long suffered in silence, began to rise up. In the remote corners of the galaxy, scattered resistance groups were inspired by the humans' fight. What had once seemed like a hopeless battle had now become a full-scale movement, a movement that threatened to bring down the Empire's reign of terror. But even as humanity's cause spread, the Empire was not ready to surrender. In fact, their response was swift and unforgiving. New fleets were dispatched, and their military leaders began to strategize ways to crush the human resistance once and for all. The Empire's vast resources, once believed to be unbeatable, were now being directed at Earth and its allies. The threat of annihilation still loomed over them, but the humans were no longer afraid. The fight had become a symbol, not just of survival, but of defiance, a fight for freedom that transcended Earth and united countless civilizations. President Lockwood, standing strong at the helm of Earth's forces, knew that the path ahead would not be easy. The battles would be hard, and the losses would be great. Yet, in her heart, she understood something fundamental that the Empire had missed. The humans had already won, not through their technology or military might, but through their unwavering belief in their right to stand free. No matter what the Empire threw at them, humanity would never back down. And as the resistance forces grew stronger and more systems joined the fight, the Empire's grip on the galaxy began to loosen. The tides were turning. The once unthinkable idea of the Empire's downfall was now within reach. And as the human resistance fought on, It became clear to the galaxy that this was more than just a battle for Earth. It was a battle for the very soul of the galaxy itself. The Empire had underestimated humanity, and now it was paying the price. The final confrontation had come. Deep within the heart of the Empire's command center, a place brimming with centuries of arrogance and control, President Sarah Lockwood stood with her forces, human and allied alike, ready to deliver the blow that would change the galaxy forever. The odds were overwhelmingly against them. The Empire's fleets still outnumbered the humans' resistance, and the power of their weapons was unmatched. Yet, the humans had something far more powerful: unity, adaptability, and the indomitable will to fight for freedom. With each passing day, the Empire's mighty war machine had been chipped away, and now, on the eve of the final battle, the tides of war were set to turn. The heart of the Empire was a fortress like no other, a sprawling complex of command centers, control rooms, and state-of-the-art technology. It was here that the Empire's top commander, High Commander Vare, had taken his position, confident that nothing and no one could challenge his rule. But even as he sat in his massive war room, surrounded by his loyal officers, he could feel the shift in the air. The humans were coming, and they were no longer the insignificant threat they had once been. They had become something more, an unstoppable force driven by a thirst for justice and the belief that no one, not even the most powerful empire in the galaxy, had the right to rule through fear and bloodshed. Lockwood's fleet, a coalition of human ships and those from liberated systems, moved with a sense of purpose. They had come too far to turn back now. Every victory had led them to this moment, and they would not falter. They approached the command center's heavily fortified defenses, engaging in a fierce, calculated assault. The Empire's ships, once invincible, were now reeling from the humans' relentless tactics. The battle was not one of raw firepower alone. It was one of intellect and cunning. Humans had learned from their enemies, adapted to their strengths, and exploited their weaknesses. What had once seemed like a death sentence for Earth now felt like a long-awaited reckoning for the Empire. The ground battle was no different. The Empire's high-tech defense systems were met with human ingenuity, soldiers who knew how to outsmart, outthink, and outfight their oppressors. Every inch of the Empire's command center was a battlefield, from the towering citadels to the narrow, twisting corridors where the humans had the advantage. As Lockwood led the charge, her eyes never wavered. She was determined, not just to win, but to end this war once and for all. The final face-off came in the central command hall, where High Commander Vare awaited her. He had been prepared for a battle of strength, of weapons, and tactics. What he hadn't anticipated was the sheer will of the human spirit. Lockwood stepped into the room, her presence as commanding as any fleet. Her message was clear, her resolve unshakable. "You are not invincible," she said, her voice echoing in the chamber, "and today your empire falls." The battle that ensued was not one of sheer violence, but of wits, strategy, and pure will. Vare, accustomed to crushing his enemies with overwhelming force, found himself caught in a web of surprises. Every move he made, Lockwood countered with precision. Every plan he set in motion was undone by the humans' relentless ingenuity. It became clear that while the Empire had the power, humanity had something far more potent: resilience, adaptability, and the ability to think beyond the confines of brute strength. In a final, decisive move, Lockwood and her forces targeted the core of the Empire's central systems. With a single strike, a series of critical systems went offline, sending shockwaves through the command center. The Empire's once unassailable power crumbled, and for the first time in millennia, the galaxy witnessed the fall of its greatest empire. High Commander Vare, defeated, stood in stunned silence as his empire disintegrated before his eyes. Earth stood victorious, and with it, a new era dawned. The galaxy, forever changed by humanity's courage and determination, watched as the once enslaved species now became a symbol of hope and resistance. No longer would the Empire's cruelty reign over the stars. In the aftermath, Earth became a beacon for all those who had suffered under the tyranny of the Empire. And the words of President Lockwood, "Humans don't negotiate with murderers," echoed across the galaxy, inspiring countless civilizations to rise up, to fight, and to demand justice. Humanity's victory was not just a triumph over a single enemy. It was a declaration to the galaxy. No force, no matter how powerful, could ever subdue the will of a species united in the pursuit of freedom. The rise of Earth as a force not to be underestimated had begun, and the universe would never forget the lesson humanity had taught. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, the fight for justice, freedom, and survival would never cease.